Welcome in, everyone.
Good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon now, right? I'm about a minute away from being afternoon anyway.
We have quite a few people signed up today, so I'm going to give it a little bit to allow people to get in, get settled. Make sure my phone is on silent. All right, I know people will keep trickling in, but let's get this started and want to make sure I'm respectful of everybody's time. So hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to What's Different in California. Today, this is sponsored by the Central Valley Regional HR Hotline. My name is Anna Manzano, and I am the Digital Media and Events Strategist here at the California Employers Association. Before we begin today's webinar officially, I'd like to go over just a couple details with you. Your audio will be muted throughout the presentation, but we do ask for your participation anyway. If you have any questions about the presentation, you can type them into the Q&A box along the bottom row at any time, and we'll try to address them as we go. Handouts for this presentation were attached to the reminder email, which included the link to this presentation. If you need them resent for whatever reason, please put your email into the chat box and I will work to get those resent to you as soon as possible. And lastly, our survey. Because your feedback is very important to us, please complete the survey by accessing the QR code at the end of your presentation. We'll have a slide and it's also in your handout. It shouldn't take more than a minute or two to complete, and it really does provide us with valuable feedback that we use to constantly improve on our webinars and continue to provide you with amazing resources. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. We have Astrid Servin, who is HR Director here at the California Employers Association.
Thank you, Anna. And welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. And welcome to today's topic, What's Different in California? We should probably say what's not different in California and go that way. Might be better because there is so much differences in California. But we will cover when it comes to employment law. That's what we're here to do this afternoon. Before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to our Central Valley County hotlines. We hear from you. We love hearing from you. So please keep calling. You'll see, depending on the county that you're in or that your employees are in, you can use this toll-free number to give us a call. This is a no-cost HR hotline provided to you by the county. So please use this. We love working with Irene and everyone at Central Valley. We enjoy working with you and our partnership with you all. We provide guidance on things, everything from the beginning of employment cycle all the way to the end of the employment cycle and everything in between that can come about. So please utilize this hotline. It's tell your other coworkers, other companies about it, so that they also call in and take advantage of this wonderful benefit that you all have. As Anna mentioned, if you have questions, well, I'm welcome. Please, I want you guys to ask questions. We may not get to all of them just because there are quite a few of you on today, but we will do our best to take those as we go along, and I'll try to answer them as we go along. And then if we don't get to them, then I can also reach out to you after. Just put your email on there, and then I will get back to you via email. All right, so let's get started. A little bit more about us. So you do have a free hotline through the county, which is wonderful, a wonderful benefit. If you need a little bit more assistance, if you're finding that you actually need a little bit more support, we are also an HR consulting company. So not only do we offer that 800 number where we can answer questions and keeping them at 15 minutes, but we also offer things such as handbooks, policy templates, guidelines, some fact sheets on a wide variety of topics. We do training. We do webinars like this for you personally. We do harassment prevention training. We do communications, soft skills trainings for managers and employees, all kinds of training. Both on site, we also come on site if that's something that you need, and then we do not just training, but we also do investigations. So if you need any kind of workplace investigations, negotiations, that kind of thing, we are also that kind of company. What we are not is a law firm, however, so we cannot rely upon what we're going to be presenting as legal advice. We want you to talk to your attorney. A lot of this stuff is legal, and we get you to the point where you need to talk to your attorney possibly, so it's always good to partner with us. We know a lot about these laws. but we can't counsel you in the way an attorney can. So when it comes to those kinds of concerns or those kinds of themes, then I'll say we'll escalate that to an attorney. If you don't have a partnership with an attorney, we do have some great law firms that we like to partner with, and we can suggest those, and they're on our website as well. So let's get going here. This is what we're going to cover today. We're going to cover the beginning of the employment cycle, which is when you're posting your job postings, which there's some new laws there in California. And we're going to start off on the right foot. We're going to talk about wage and hour guidelines because they are different, and the state of California has quite a few wage and hour guidelines that vary from the federal guidelines. We're going to talk about leave of absences because we are unique in that area as well. And then go into discrimination and harassment. We have our own Civil Rights Department, just changed their name to the Civil Rights Department. It used to be the Department of Fair Employment Housing. And the CRR also does provide a lot of guidance when it comes to discrimination, harassment, and specifically has employers follow certain laws. So we'll talk about that. And then all the way to the end of the employment relationship. What's unique about ending the relationship in California? What do we have to do there? So we'll cover all those things, and I hope you can stay with me through the end. You have the slideshows, the slide deck here, and if you don't, email Anna, put it in your email in the chat, and she'll make sure she gets it to you because this is a good reference PowerPoint presentation. So let's begin with the recruiting and hiring. What's our best practices when we do that? And from the get-go, we like to include the at-will employment. You want to make sure that the at-will employment is in your handbook. And if you do not have a handbook, that it's somewhere, that it's in the offer letter that you give employees. That at-will employment is very important because, as we may already know, California is what we call an at-will state, meaning there is no contract with this employee. Both parties can terminate that relationship at any time, but we need to disclose that. We need to disclose it, make it very clear that the employment relationship we have with our employees is at will, and that needs to be placed on there. And not only that, but we need to put it in, again, applications and offer letters and handbooks and be consistent about the language we use and who has the authority to modify the at-will relationship. That needs to be in writing, again, preferably in a handbook, but if, again, some small employers tend to not have handbooks, so we want to put it in an offer letter. If we have that, it needs to be in writing. The reason for that is because we get sometimes into trouble where supervisors or managers are saying things to employees like, I hope you're here for the next year, or for the next year we're going to be working on this project, and the employee is feeling like, I got this job for the next year. And so we want to say who has that authority. It's not just your lower level supervisors. It's got to be someone like a CEO, the owner, the president of the company. Those are the very few limited positions within a company typically that has the authority to modify. And we want that in writing so that there's no confusion if a supervisor said this, that's the case. It needs to be that other higher authority manager. Let's move on to the no salary history questions because employers cannot rely upon salary history information. We can no longer do that when hiring an employees. So employers are prohibited from asking about or relying on that salary history as a factor for hiring. And this there's been a lot of talk about this. You may have heard it. It's been on the news, equal pay. We really are trying to get away from years of possibly employees not getting fair payment, fair wages. It's typically women or underrepresented classes. And so what we're trying to do is ban that, prevent that from being a factor on how we hire employees. So the salary history includes compensation as well as benefits. Employers should audit your job applications, and I would do a lot of audits for new companies, and I want to say most 90% of employers are ensuring they're not asking for that. But if you have an old application, please take a look and remove that question from that application. And the other thing you should do is train your managers and supervisors not to ask about that in interviews or during the hiring process, because the company can get it right and not ask it. But if you have your supervisors who are interviewing and they get it wrong, you're in trouble. So we want to make sure that we're training the people who interview to ensure they know the law. So applicants, who is an applicant, the salary history ban applies to the applicants defined as individuals seeking employment. It doesn't apply to current employees up for promotion. So you may have an employee applying for a job in a different department. You can ask that internal employee what they are making if it's the same company, not if it's an outside company, because then that's an applicant. Salary expectations, some definitions on that, because we do get this question asked a lot. Employers can inquire about an applicant's salary expectation. That's okay. What do you expect to make in this position? What do you expect to earn in this position? That would be okay. So that's the way we kind of try and get to where they wish they were or how much they hope to be making. Now, there's a lot of other things because we have the pay transparency laws as well, which is what we're going to cover next. Everything is full disclosure now on the employer side, and the only way we're going to know from our employee what they wish to make is by asking that question, what do you expect to make? So here's the new laws for 2023 regarding pay transparency. All employers must provide a pay scale to any current employee for their current position. So if an employee just comes to you and says, look, I know about this new pay transparency law, I'd like to know what the pay scale is for my position. It wasn't given to me when I started because I started in 2005 and that wasn't the case, but now I'd like to know what the pay scale is for my position. And upon request, you need to provide that pay scale to that employee within a reasonable amount of time. And you must maintain, the other thing that happened in 2023 is you now have to maintain records for employees of their job title and their wage rate history. So a lot of times we have software systems, payroll systems that keep this. You just want to make sure that they're doing that. And if they're not, then you need to keep some sort of Excel spreadsheet or some sort of Google sheet, something that has all your employees' names, their job title, and their wage rate history. This is going to be beginning January 1, 2023. You no need to retro back to the life cycle of that employee. You're just going to start that from January 1 and moving forward. So we want to keep these records for 3 years. So we're going to have to keep updating anytime this employee gets a promotion, gets a raise. We're going to update this spreadsheet that we have, this information sheet. Again, a lot of payroll software systems, you do keep track of this. You just want to make sure that they're keeping it for 3 years after their the separation of that employee. So through the life cycle of that employee while they're employed with you, and then 3 years thereafter. So that's a lot of information you're going to have to start keeping track of, especially if you have a lot of employees. And then for you employers who have 15 or more employees, the new pay transparency law also says that you have to include the pay scale for a position that you're posting. So any positions that you have out there on the various social media links or anything that you have, you are advertising the position, you now have to have a pay scale if you have 15 or more employees. This is including if you use a third-party recruiter, if you have a temp agency and they have your job posted for you, they need to make sure that they have that pay scale for that position. And a pay scale, let me see if the next one has that, and it doesn't. A pay scale is from what you expect to pay that position right now, the minimum all the way to the maximum. So that there needs to be some sort of gauge between the two. It can't just be one. If it's one, that's okay if you really don't mean to pay anything else beyond that. We had an employer who says, look, I only pay minimum wage. I don't pay more than that ever. And that's their pay scale would be that minimum wage rate if they truly don't intend to pay more than that. Although I don't know, good luck hiring people with that kind of pay scale, but it depends on the position and the company. So just make sure that we're honoring that we're having that full pay scale for those open positions. And that's Senate Bill 1162. All right. Let's talk a little bit about pre-employment tests because some employers do that. And we want to make sure that we cover this topic as well. It's very important that employers are paying for any pre-employment tests that are out there. We don't want any kind of cost to an applicant. So employee is not working for us, we can't be having them pay to work for us in the future. So it needs to be a prepaid, and any kind of test that you have, any kind of skills test that you might have, those need to be paid for by the employer. If you do pre-employment drug testing, it is permitted after conditional offer of employment. Now, you may have heard there's a new law that's coming out that was passed this year that's effective next year, and that's for marijuana use. And so the California Supreme Court has determined that you can test for marijuana right now. The reason why this new law is not being applied until next year is because we're still working on the test. The test is going to have to determine whether an employee has marijuana in their system today versus recreationally a week ago, possibly over the weekend. Not sure how they're going to figure that one out, which is why it's taking a year to apply this new law that's going to be in effect next year. And we'll have more information on that, so stay tuned about that. But nonetheless, right now, you currently can test for marijuana. Some employers choose not to. They have taken it out of the pre-employment drug testing altogether. That is your choice, and your policy will dictate that. There's physical and mental examinations. These are again are only permitted after a conditional job offer is made. Exam must be job related and consistent with the business necessity. And that's really important because you can get in trouble for a physical mental examination that has absolutely no relevance to the job that they're doing. So we want to make sure if we're in that practice of doing that, and I think we're moving more and more away from that, but if we are doing that, that we're really looking at, does use your judgment here. Does this make sense? And ensure you change some policies there if you need to. Okay, let's move on to ban the box. Initially started in the Bay Area, and now then it grew to the construction industry, and now it's impacting all employers with 5 or more employees. So if you're an employer with 5 or more employees, you are prohibited from asking about criminal convictions on a job application. And that's what we infamously call ban the box. We don't do that anymore. We cannot ask criminal conviction history information on job applications or in interviews. Again, very important that you train whoever is interviewing, that they know the law, that they understand they shouldn't be asking about this until a conditional offer has been made. You can run these criminal conviction questions and criminal background checks, but you have to extend a job offer first. So once you do that, you're allowed to make an inquiry about it. You can deny employment if conviction history has a direct and adverse relationship with specific job duties. So for example, you can deny employment if you're looking for a driving position and there is something that comes up in the criminal conviction, in the criminal background check as a DUI. There is a direct and adverse relationship there, and so you can deny employment. But if you see a DUI and the position is for a different position that doesn't require driving, that may be a little bit difficult to deny because there isn't a direct and adverse. So the law is becoming very difficult to deny employment unless you can prove that. And there's a whole series of things you need to do, which we'll cover in the next slide. But be aware also, San Francisco, Los Angeles, if you're hiring in those cities and those counties, there's even more specific requirements when it comes to declining a position for this reason. Let's talk about hearing as in general in California. If you're going to deny employment because you see there's a criminal conviction, and we get this question in the hotline, feel free to call us if that comes up and we can guide you through it, because you do have to provide a written notification of preliminary decision and include the specific conviction. That's the basis of why you're denying employment. You have to have a copy of the conviction history report, and you need to allow the applicant to respond to that. So they have 5 days to respond to that written notification that you give them. They will have an opportunity to state their case. What's the reason? This was an error. I can prove it. This is the reason why shouldn't be taken into consideration. And you need to allow 5 days for that. And you need to consider the information that they provide. Now, you can still deny employment once you get that back, or maybe 5 days goes by and they don't respond, and then you'll provide a final letter. So you're going to notify them 2 times if you see that criminal conviction. This is why it's very important not to start an employee until you get the results of the criminal conviction. We got a call the other day from a member who said, we ran the criminal conviction, but we really needed them to start, and so we started them and we didn't get it back until 5 days later, and then we realized, oh, we can't have this person in this position. There was a direct relationship there, and we can't have them here. Can we fire them? And it's tricky because you started them, and you had to go through these steps, and you missed that because you started that employee before you were able to. So it creates a risk there for the employer once you start that employee without doing this first. So to just finish off here, provide that final letter. There's an adverse action notice required in writing, and then inform the applicant that they can file with the Civil Rights Department if they need more information or if they want to appeal further. The Civil Rights Department is the agency in California that handles this, and if you want to talk to a background specialist, we have this bit.ly you can follow if you are in need of a background check company that's compliant, that understands these steps. But if you do need also the adverse action notice, because there's a template for it, you would just go to the Civil Rights Department webpage, or you can link to us, and we can help you find that as well. Okay. So when you begin employees in California, there are quite a few required hiring forms. Even if you're a small employer, these are going to apply. Most of them are going to apply. We used to just give an I-9 and a tax form and call it a day. But really, there's a lot of required hiring forms. And again, they're required. So they're not just optional forms that we need to give employees. They are required. So if you're a member of ours, we give you an orientation checklist with links to all these forms. But make sure that you have these. So you want your I-9, which is completed on day one, and then the Section 2, which is what the employer verifies, that is to be done within 3 business days. That's Section 2. You have your W-4 tax form, the California tax form that we used to just be able to give the W-4 and use it for California. Can't do that. We need California needs its own tax form, so that's the DE-4. We need an acknowledgement receipt of an IIPP. And I hope you're not saying what's an IIPP because it is required also. Injury Illness Prevention Plan is what IIP stands for. Injury Illness Prevention Plan, and that is the safety binder. It should be like a safety binder that has all your safety procedures for the company. It is a requirement per Cal OSHA, and Cal OSHA provides a template for that IIPP. If you go to Cal OSHA's website, there is a template there for the IIPP. You just plug in your information. That's a simple way to do it. Depending on your business, if you have a simple business, that should do it. If you have a more extensive business that requires a lot of physical labor, physical things that may impact safety, you should probably speak to a safety partner. We have some of those as well, and they can assist you with creating an IIPP. So you need an acknowledgement. They don't need a copy of the IIPP, but you need an acknowledgement that they know where it is at your company. Like that binder is held here in the warehouse and you have access to it. You can look at it at any time. And so their acknowledging that they know that IIPP exists. The discrimination and harassment prevention policy and acknowledgement, California requires a specific policy on discrimination and harassment prevention, and that form should be given to the employee, that policy, so you want to make sure that you get acknowledgement for that. Lactation accommodation notice is also a requirement for all employees, not just female employees, it's for everyone. Pregnancy disability leave notice, and because again, that's telling people what they're eligible for should this happen to them. Victims of crime and abuse notice is also a requirement. These are little flyers, and by the way, you can order free flyers. You can go to the respective websites in California, the agencies that hold these. For the most part, they live in the Civil Rights Department area, and you can order these for free. They give them to you in little 25-page ones, or you can download the form. And Form CRD 185 is a sexual harassment information sheet. So not only do you have the policy, but there's also a sexual harassment information sheet that California provides. And yes, there's a second page because there is more. You also have your disability insurance pamphlet, your paid family leave brochure, workers' compensation, and these are all rights. None of these things are anything the employer necessarily has to give, benefits the employer has to give, like SDI and paid family leave, but the California is taking the opportunity that you're seeing them for you to inform employees that these benefits exist, that they've been paying into them, and now they're here for you should you need them. So let's say personal physician and chiropractor pre-designation form. So in case of a workers' comp, an employee has the right to pre-designate a doctor. So you need to give them that opportunity when you hire them to say, here's the workers' comp brochure, here's who our workers' comp carrier is, and here's a pre-designation form. These forms, again, you can Google them. They're free. You can log on to our website. You can always access these, and they're pretty standard. Your workers' comp carrier also may have them, so check with them as well. We're down to the last three. The Wage Theft Prevention Act, sometimes called the 2810.5 form. This is for your hourly employees. It gives them detailed information about the job that they're working in, their hourly rate, their sick leave time, how it's accrued, or is it a lump sum. It talks about the workers' comp carrier. It has your information for you to fill in about workers' comp. Again, their hourly rate. So it's a very important form. Both of you sign. They sign, you keep a copy, and you give them a copy. And let me tell you, this form has helped me in front of the labor commissioner when disputing an employee's rate of pay, that they said they didn't agree to that rate of pay. They thought it was a different one. And all we had to do is bring out the Wage Theft Prevention Act form, and that was enough. The labor commissioner said, case closed. You signed that you agreed to this rate, and that was it. So that's a good form, and it is required. And then the DE-34, this is something that you do online. Once an employee starts, you report that new employee to the state. And then if you have salespeople, then California salespeople have to have a written commission agreement. If your salesperson is paid commissions, that needs to be in writing and spelled out specifically. That is a requirement if you have sales folks. Okay, so let's move on a little bit because California is it's a little tricky when it comes to how we define employees and independent contractors. So we wanted to quickly cover this because there's been some movement in independent contractors. We really should look at workers in California as employees. So anyone who performs services for the benefit of the employee is going to be an employee. This includes minors, undocumented workers. They are considered an employee in California, and they are not an independent contractor and they are not interns. So all workers are considered employees unless that you can meet some criteria. So the way that an independent contractor would work is first they're looked at as an employee, but if they meet the ABC test, if they meet certain criteria where they're exempted from being an employee, then you can count them as an independent contractor. We can't have employers saying, I just want to hire them as an independent contractor. We realize that happens a lot, but you're running quite a bit of a risk because the penalties have gone up and they're very high. So we want to make sure that when we hire an independent contractor, we're following this test. We're presuming that they're employees unless the worker is free from control and direction of the hire, meaning I can't tell you when to come in. I can kind of come to an agreement. If you want to come in at 9, okay, come in at 9. But if you say I can't come in till 12, then you come in at 12. So we don't have direct control over you or your discipline, none of that. Performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. This is really important. We want to make sure that the employer is, they don't typically have this kind of job. If I have telemarketers and I want to hire an independent contractor as a telemarketer, that won't fly because all your other telemarketers are employees. You need to hire them as an employee. But if I have a business that, let's see, it's a painting job, and I need a graphic artist to do something, that graphic artist is nothing to do with my painting job. So that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity. I can now hire that person possibly as an independent contractor. They still need to be free from control and direction, and they have to have their own business. So the C part is also one that needs to be met, which is customarily engaged in a trade or occupation or a business of the same nature as the work performed. So this graphic designer has a graphic company or they do graphic designing for several companies. Now C would be satisfied by that definition. So multiple fault violations can be up to 25,000. They're really kind of trying fairly. You've heard there's other exceptions as well. So if you feel your worker qualifies for this, check in with us. We're happy to go through kind of this little test with you to see, because there's other exceptions to lawyers and accountants and a lot of other workers, Uber drivers, as you may know. So let's talk more about this by calling in if this applies to you. Okay, let me just quickly check Q&A. We're okay. So let's move on to the world of wage and hour. Some things to cover there. There is a local minimum wage increase that happens just about every January, and I'm trying to pull up what the latest one is because there's also one in July. And I'm just going to quickly read out if these cities apply to the workers where your worker lives, then we're going to want to pay attention, or you're going to want to email me later so that I can tell you. But if you have workers in Alameda, Berkeley, Emeryville, Fremont, LA City and County, Malibu, Milpitas, Pasadena, San Francisco, Santa Monica, or West Hollywood, you all just had an increase or will have an increase on July 1st. So if those cities apply to workers where your workers work, then we'll need to talk because that minimum wage is going up in July. Might have just gone up in January, but will go up again in July. So we want to make sure we track where our employees are working, since a lot of you are allowing a remote work. We'll need to know where they're living and where they're performing the work at. So you can follow us here on this bit.ly as well, and we keep track of that for you. Here's what it currently is. So minimum wage in the state is $15.50. This is regardless of size. So long as the day we used to have those charts with if you are between this employer or 25 or less or 25 or more. Now we're all in the same size here, employers, $15.50. Now if you're exempt, that salary is double the rate of a minimum wage in the state, not in the city where the employee works. So even if minimum wage is $18 an hour, like it is in certain cities, San Francisco is one of them, it's a little more than 18, you don't have to double the minimum wage in the city to get the exempt salary. The exempt salary comes from the state's minimum wage. So currently, if you have exempt level and folks, those employees need to be paid at least 64,480. And if you can't meet that threshold, if you can't pay that amount, you'll need to have your employee transition to an hourly employee. And we have some tips for that in that link that you see there, because it is difficult to transition an exempt employee to hourly. We had that happen quite a bit once minimum wage went up and the state minimum wage for salary went up. A lot of employers were like thinking, I just can't pay that amount. And so we had to transition those exempt employees to hourly, which creates a whole lot of things, right, that we're going to talk about next, because now we're having to deal with overtime, which is 1.5 times regular rate of pay for any work, for any hourly folks that you have that are paid overtime. Those are for any hours worked over 8 hours, and then over 40 hours in a work week, different than federal. And then also for the first 8 hours worked on the 7th consecutive day in a work week. Remember, a work week is what you define as a work week. The standard is Sunday through Saturday, but a company may say that doesn't make sense for my company. I like my company to start on a Monday and end on a Sunday. And so when you're looking at overtime for that 7th consecutive day, you're going to want to look at the work week that you have defined as the 7 days of the work week. So that, again, the first 8 hours worked on the 7th day, an employee can very much work 7 days in a row, but be in 2 completely different weeks, and then you're okay. So take a look at that, and that should be in your handbook. It should be a policy defining what your work week is. And then when we get into double time, you must pay 2 times the regular rate of pay for any hours over 12 in a workday, and then after 8 on that 7th consecutive day. So again, keep this chart handy if you need to. We want to touch that the regular rate is used for calculating overtime. So the regular rate is the figure that gets multiplied by 1.5 or 2 times to calculate. It's not just their overtime rate, which is 1.5. The regular rate is different. If an employee earns any type of other compensation, so if you have, we'll go through actually what is included in a regular rate, then you might bump that 1.5 times a little bit higher. If the employee uses the base rate instead of the regular rate, then the overtime will be insufficient, and then you're into these penalties areas. So the regular rate, what it includes, because again, lots of confusion, we don't want to confuse the regular rate with the base hourly rate. An employee's base hourly rate is what they get paid for each hour worked, but the regular rate, and you don't have to worry about this if your employees do not get paid additional earnings, but if your employees are earning commissions, piece rate, shift differentials, retroactive pay increases, or non-discretionary bonuses, which are planned, then you need to factor that money, that additional earning, into your regular rate. This has actually turned employers away from paying bonuses and paying shift differentials, because now we have to calculate that. And if you have a payroll system, they probably can easily do that. But if you're figuring this out, the regular rate on your own, it may be a little bit cumbersome, especially if you have a lot of employees. So just ensure that you're paying adequately. Again, that difference might be not much, maybe a few dollars, but those few dollars add up if we don't get it correctly and an employee files a wage claim on you 3 years later. Okay, that adds up quickly. We want to make sure that we're also paying premium pay for each workday an employer fails to provide a sufficient meal break or a rest break. We'll talk about meal breaks and all that too, but if you fail to provide a meal break, we do need to pay premium pay, which is 1 hour of regular rate of pay for any time you miss that meal period. And the reason why we have this wage statement is because it needs to show up there. That's a new law for 2023. If you're paying that premium pay, it does need to show on this wage statement. So we want to make sure that you cover that, and we included all the other things as well on here. And that should show up right over here where the total hours worked is. I don't know if they included that on this one, but it should be on there. That's the point we put it in here, is it should, oh, there it is, premium pay. So it should show regular overtime and then premium pay. We didn't have to do that before, but it is a requirement now. Okay, so speaking of meal and rest break, this is how you would owe that premium pay. If you fail to relieve employees of all duty, fail to relinquish control, or not giving an employee a reasonable opportunity to take it, discouraging employees from taking it, not keeping track. Meal periods is unpaid, meaning you have to clock in and clock out for that, and that should be shown on the timesheet or timekeeping system that you use. We can't just say, I'm going to deduct 30 minutes from every time they work. It actually has to show the actual clock in and clock out time. These are for your hourly employees. The rest break does not need to be clocked out because it's paid. You can record it that they took it if you want to. You can have a disclosure at the end of the week that says I was able to take all my rest breaks in the week. You can have something like that. If you're going to track each rest break, though, be consistent, because the one day you fail to do that, even though they took it, can open you up to liability. So if you are going to record every single break, not the meal period has to, but if you're going to record every single rest period, then just do it consistently for everybody, because again, this one could look, if you're audited, like you didn't give one. Okay, so here's a refresher on the meal breaks. You have to permit at least that 30-minute meal break if an employee is working more than 5 hours per day. You must start the meal break before the end of the 5th hour. So employee must clock out by, if they're working 4 hours and 59 minutes, they have to clock out the very latest by that 4 hours and 59 minutes into their shift. They need to be relieved of all job duties, and failure to provide is that 1 hour penalty that we talked about, 1 hour premium pay. So that's how it breaks down. There's a few exceptions. If an employee is going to end their workday by 6 hours, then they can waive their meal period for the day. That's only if they're going to work 6 hours. If they work 6 hours and 1 minute, then it won't work. You'll have to have given them that meal break. So you got to be tricky. It's tricky sometimes to capture it if an employees are using a time clock and they're running late and clocking out, and now they clocked out at 6:05 at the 6 hours and 5 minute mark. That's problematic. So you need to be creative on how you maybe schedule employees so that they're not at the 6 hour, maybe they're at 5 hours and 45 minutes. So get creative on how you do that. A little bit on rest breaks. These don't have to again be clocked in or out. They shouldn't be because they're paid, but you do need to authorize and permit them to be taken. They should try to make them in the middle of each workday as practicable. We don't like employees taking their 2 10 minutes and making a 20-minute break, or 2 15 minutes and making a 30-minute, because the labor commissioner says they should be spread out. That's the purpose of rest breaks, is for them to break. So they are paid, and it should be 10 minutes of net rest time for every 4 hours or major fraction thereof. And failure to provide this rest break is also an hour of premium pay. And this is how it breaks up depending on how many hours they worked, how many rest breaks that they get. And you do need to relieve them of all duties, meaning if they need to run over and check in with security before they're out, that's not their break time. Their break time would start once they check out of security, and then they're out and they're relieved of all control. So that was some of the things that you may have heard of in the news with Walmart and Amazon, where employees are having to go through a tight security to get out and be able to rest. Well, their rest 10 minutes can't start until then. So that's why employers sometimes give that cushion of 15 minutes, because that would allow that 5 minutes of having to get to where they need to get to rest. All right, and we can't we can't force them to be on the premises anymore, so make sure that you have policies, your policies do not say that. Employees are free to go where they want during their rest break, which sometimes we have issues of, because they can make it back and forth from the Starbucks in 10 minutes, you got to allow it, but there's also some liability there. So, but we can't have them stay on the premises anymore. Okay, we're leaving the wage and hour world and we're getting into the leave of absence world. We're halfway done through our training, a little more than that. So I'm going to kind of speed through some of these. Each leave law works different, and your head count is going to matter here. So if you're a very small employer, less than 5, some of these aren't going to apply. But once you're at 5 or more, most of these are going to apply. So let's start with pregnancy disability leave. This is for employers with 5 or more employees. You have to allow pregnancy disability leave. We've had members who say, look, I didn't know she was pregnant, and during the interview process, and now she's telling me she's 7 months pregnant, and I need to allow her pregnancy disability leave. Yes, you do. 4 months or 88 days of job protected leave if they're impacted by pregnancy. And that could be impacted by pregnancy because of morning sickness, because they're not able to come because they need rest, bed rest, or they've been disabled because they had the baby and now they've been disabled. It typically is not 4 months. It's typically 6 to 8 weeks after the baby's born. That's usually how long a woman is disabled after she has a baby, is 6 to 8 weeks. That's typically what it is. But if they needed it before, or there's a complication and they need it after, then they are allowed up to 4 months. But all that needs to be done with a doctor's note. So if the doctor disables her, it can't just be, I feel like bonding with the baby. That's a different type of leave. Then it wouldn't be counted as pregnancy disability leave. So we'll talk about that in a second here. Let's see. Next one is CFRA, the California Family Rights Act. It's going to be for your employer's 5 or more employees. And this is when an employee is given 12 weeks of unpaid leave and guaranteed job protection. The benefits, you must continue them during this leave. It's 12 weeks within a 12-month specified period for eligible employees. The employee has to have worked with you for 12 months, and in that 12 months have worked for you for 1250 hours. Usually that's roughly about full-time in that prior 12 months. So again, the pregnancy disability leave is different because that pregnancy disability covers an employee when they're disabled for pregnancy. The CFRA is going to cover you for a lot of different reasons, and it runs separately from the PDL, from that pregnancy disability leave. For 2023, the new thing that we have is that you do have a designated person for CFRA. So if an employee wants to designate a person that is not already on the list for CFRA, you must allow that. Here are the covered reasons. So once they're done with their pregnancy disability leave and they're no longer disabled, then they want to bond with their baby. That's when the CFRA would kick in, and only if they're eligible. If you have that employee who just started with you and they're 7 months pregnant, they will not be eligible for this leave. They'll only be eligible for that pregnancy disability leave. But let's say you have a 5-year employee, they're going to be eligible for both the pregnancy disability leave and then the baby bonding after that. Or let's get away from the pregnancy world. If they have their own health condition, it's going to cover that for CFRA. Family and armed forces, if they have someone on active duty coming home, that will be covered. And if you need to care for a family member with a serious health condition, and there's specific definitions of who a family member is under the CFRA or that designated person. So lactation accommodation is the other one we'll cover quickly. This is allowing a reasonable break in a reasonable location of where a mother can express breast milk in private. Cannot be a bathroom, and has to be a private place. There are very specific rules on what needs to be allowed with lactation accommodations. So definitely give us a call if this is you and this is someone who's asking for an accommodation, because there are some very specific, like you need to have access to a sink and water and a place to store milk, all that. So there is no undue hardship. It doesn't matter if you have 5 employees, this will still apply, and you need to find a way to accommodate, because there are some violations. They're not really high right now, but for subsequent violations there is. So we want to make sure we get this right. The paid family leave program, I mentioned it earlier, and I hate the name of it because it implies that it's a leave, but it's actually a paid program. This is something the state offers. It's not something, it's unique to California, very unique. Most states do not have this. But if you think of it as state disability insurance covers me when I'm disabled, that's what pays me. Well, paid family leave covers me and pays me by the state when I'm covered under CFRA or FMLA. So that's what paid family leave does. It's something the state offers. That's why you have to give them that pamphlet when you first start. And that is when I have my own serious health condition that's not pregnancy. Maybe I broke my leg or something, or I'm caring for a family member, or I have baby bonding. Then this is where the paid family leave programs begins, and the state pays them. So you are not, as an employer, obligated to do anything other than tell them about it. That's why you're handing them a pamphlet when they first start, and you're handing them a pamphlet when they request a leave of absence. You're saying, hey, there's this wonderful program, you can apply. The employee does the rest. They do all that. It does give them 8 weeks of paid partial payment for their reason why they're out. State disability insurance is the other benefit that we have in California. There's a 7-day waiting period, and they can provide up to 52 weeks for your own health condition. If remember, paid family leave is for your family, state disability is for yourself. And again, that's another very unique program to California that's very different than most states. Most states do not have a state disability insurance. These are things that are taken out of our paychecks, so they're there for us once we need them. Vacation policies are also very different in California. We want to, you know, they're very unique in that you don't have to have a vacation policy in your company, but if you do, you need to follow California's guidance. So it's one of those things where you can have it if you want, but if you do, you'll need to follow what California says. So it's your discretion whether or not you have a vacation policy, but if you do, make sure you write it correctly. You do need to have a reasonable cap. It can't just be, well, I give everyone a week of vacation and that's it. You can have that week of vacation, but you need to pay it out if they don't use it, or allow it to roll over if you can't just have a use it or lose it policy like we used to. And if you do allow them to roll it over, you need to allow a reasonable cap so they continue to accrue. So that reasonable cap should be at least 1.5 times. Excuse me. And that vacation does need to I'm sorry, I'm just reading a question here and had to do with the previous slide. What if you're exempt from SDI nonprofit for the paid leave from the state? Yeah, so most employers, private employers or employees are being paid, you're paying into paid family leave and SDI. If you're a public employer, you're probably not paying into that. You'll have to see whether you pay into it or not. That benefit may not be allowed if you're a public employer not paying into the program. You can then the leave laws will apply. California Family Rights Act will apply to public. FMLA will apply to public, but the pay portion of it, the employer may have another option such as short-term disability that covers the employee. They will not be covered under these programs unless they pay for them. They may have some money from a previous employer. So let's say you're a public employee, an employee that has worked private in the past, they may have some money available to them. So you'll need to still inform them of it, and it's up to them, what to the state, whether they approve it or not. So I hope that answered your question. So back to vacation, you have to pay it out upon termination. So if an employee, you allow a week of vacation a year and the employee only made it 6 months, so now they've earned about 20 hours of vacation. When the employee quits, you have to pay that out. In California, vacation has to be accrued. So you can't just say at the end of the year, you get 40 hours. You can say that again, but that employee has been accruing that 40 hours all year long. So if an employee again quits on you mid-year, they will have some hours accumulated and that needs to be paid out. So you cannot say you have to make it a year before it's paid out. You can say you have to make it a year before you use it, but it's been accruing all this time. So one way is accruing it and one way is paying it out. I hope that makes sense. Make sure your policies are applied consistently. We want to make sure that all your employees, you can have policies where maybe your exempt employees or your management earns 2 weeks a year and the lower level employees earn one time a year, but for the most part, the part about the cap needs to be consistent. They need to be accruing consistently, but the rate may be different. Personal days and floating days. Some employers like to have these. I give 2 personal days or 2 floating days or a birthday. Be careful with those because they're treated as vacation in California. So if you have these 2 personal days, what I'd recommend is just adding 2 extra vacation days because that's really how they have to be treated. Or 2 floating days, just give them 2 extra vacation days because you can call it that, but it's going to work the same way. When they're terminated, it needs to be paid out. They can't ever lose it. So it works in the same manner. And so a lot of times it just makes more sense to give them more vacation time and get rid of the floating holiday, the birthday, personal. A lot of those are going away. Companies aren't doing them for this reason because California just treats them as vacation. Okay, and we have our paid sick leave, which I'm hoping all of you know. It's for the state. It's 24 hours or 3 days for all employees to address their own serious health condition or that of their family member or their designated person that's new for 2023. You can run that 24 hours or 3 days in a lump sum by giving it to them right away or by accruing it. We're doing that 1 hour for every 30. It is not paid out at termination of employment unless you fold it into a PTO plan. If your paid sick leave and your vacation are all part of a PTO plan, that entire PTO plan has to get paid out upon termination, which is why a lot of employers like to separate them because sick leave, we're not entitled, we don't don't have to pay out. You can make an employee wait until their 90th day of employment to use that sick leave, and we highly recommend that. We don't want to pay out, we don't want employees taking their sick time before they've been with us 90 days. And there are some local ordinances that pay out quite a bit more of sick leave than 24 hours, and there's quite a few cities also that do that. So we want to make sure that you check, again, the city, the county where your employee works, because that's the sick leave you need to follow. And we can help you with that as well by calling in. Okay, so we're at the discrimination and harassment training portion. As you may know, it is mandatory to have all of your employees take training. Your supervisors have to have 2 hours of harassment prevention training every 2 years. Your employees, your non-supervisors, have to have 1 hour for every 2 years. It must occur within 6 months of hire or of promotion if you're promoting a supervisor. It does need to be interactive. We can't just pop in a video like we used to. It now needs to be interactive. It doesn't necessarily have to be live. We have those self-paced ones, but it does need to be interactive where an employee is participating in that and answering questions. And that's for employers with 5 or more employees. So make sure you audit that and you get that done because it is very important. Let's go through at the end of the employment cycle. We are very unique in California that you have to have check in hand when you say words, you're fired. If you are involuntary terminating someone, then you must pay that employee when those words are spoken. Voluntary, and if you can't do that, and I understand a lot of times we can't do that, we just can't be there, it's done remotely, our payroll is in a different state, then we need to be creative on how we do that because you do owe an employee a day's worth of pay for every time that employee's paycheck is late. So employers have done that where they overpay an employee by 2 days because they weren't able to get that paycheck to that employee. And those are calendar days. Like that penalty starts as of day 1. If an employee voluntarily quits with more than 72 hours notice, then that same rule applies. You have to have that pay on the last day. But if an employee doesn't give you enough notice, if they give you less than 72 hours notice, now we have a little bit more time. Now we have 72 hours to pay out that employee. We still can't wait till the next payroll unless it happens within 72 hours. It has to be done by mail or we need to get it to them sooner. The date of the mailing is considered date of payment, but we need authorization that we can mail that check. Don't just mail it because we don't know if that address is the correct one to send it to. So we want to verify that. A final pay should be a live or a manual check and not a direct deposit. The direct deposit agreement ends once an employee gets their last paycheck. You would need a new one if you wanted to direct deposit a final paycheck. And that's Labor Commissioner's rule that you have to have a separate direct deposit for the final paycheck. And again, it has to be that when it's due. It can't be on the next payroll cycle. We want to be careful about this because there are some very strict penalties, and I've seen these in the thousands where employees get free money. You do need to pay the employees, well, it's not free money, it's penalty money, but employer gets docked quite a bit for not getting it right. The final pay is at the employee's primary work location, not yours. So if you terminate a remote employee, you have to be creative on how to get that money to that employee. It's going to include all wages owed, including vacation or PTO, and that's the number one way employers get there's wages claims filed against them is if you're not paying that unused vacation on that final pay, because then your final pay is not correct. If failure to adhere to these directives, the employee can be held liable for up to 30 days, and that would be 1 day's worth of wages for every day you're late, up to 30 days. So it adds up quickly, those fees. There is special rules for commissions or expense report. If an employee is a commission employee and they haven't earned them quite yet, you can pay later. That's the exception, the commissions, and then expense reports, because those are not wages, that can be paid at a future date. Everything else that you owe that employee that you're able to calculate on that final date will be owed. And we have a question, can we load final wages onto a pay card? A pay card versus a live check, I'm not 100% sure that. You may want to call into the hotline and ask that, or leave me your email and I'll get back to you. So a pay card, I don't know if the Labor Commissioner, because they do say it has to be a live check. This is what I have on my notes. Final payment of wages must be made on a live check unless the employee has authorized in advance for direct deposit of that final check. I don't know if the pay card would be acceptable. I'd have to research that for you. I'm sorry. Okay, so the penalties that I went through them somewhat. The employees, not just for final pay, but for any pay. You missed my overtime back in, you know, 2 years ago. The employee can file a claim against you with the labor commissioner. Any unpaid wages up to 3 years back. Waiting time penalties for that final pay is 30 days wages plus interest. An employee has up to 4 years to file a claim for unpaid wages from the dates that they were earned. So keep your records because it's very important. If you have an ex-employee that you keep these records, you do need to keep them for at least that 4 years. Failure to pay minimum wage. Let's say we didn't classify someone correctly, somehow missed paying them. There's, again, high penalties for that. They add up quickly. So let's move on from that because that's kind of depressing. But let's move on to termination paperwork. What should you have? And there's very few forms, thankfully, that California requires us to have at termination. One of those is the change in relationship form. You can download that, Google it. It's a template that you can find, and that's from the unemployment office. It basically says you were active and now you are inactive due to, and fill in, you can actually check off the box. You have to have the 4-year benefit pamphlet that talks about unemployment benefits, and that's a very large pamphlet. You can email it to them, or you can order the free forms because it's a thick packet. And you also, regardless if you give them insurance or not, you have to have the health insurance premium payment. It's a HIP form. Again, you can go to our website. We can direct you to what that form is, and that form allows them to get insurance through the state, through the open market if they need to. Has nothing to do with your own personal insurance. That's COBRA. So if you do have health insurance, the last form that you have to have and give them is the COBRA form, the continuation of coverage. That doesn't have to be on the last day. That can be mailed out separate, but you want to have those first three on that final day. All right, so a few more reminders and I'll leave some time for questions. We're just about at time. We do have, and California has CalSavers. I hope all of you are, unless you're less than 5 employees, all of you should have CalSavers program. This is a retirement plan for employees that the state has started. If you have your own private 401k or retirement plan, then you do not need to offer CalSavers. But if you do not have a retirement plan, then California requires you to sign up for CalSavers, and they'll take care of the rest. What they want you to do is communicate and tell the employees and register them. So you do need to go to the CalSavers website and register, and all of you should have done that because that was a requirement through the end of last year. All employers should have been enrolled. The only ones that are still out there are those employers that are very small, 1 to 4 employees. You will have until the year 2025 to register, but you can go on to CalSavers now and get started and just put in your information, and then once you hit that 2025 or you hit that 5 employees, you'll need to offer that. That should be in your handbook, that language for CalSavers. It's a very friendly, user-friendly website. You can go in there and register your company, and then they'll walk you through the steps of what they need to get your employee roster. There is mandated reporter training in California. That's very unique too. If you hire any minors, your managers need to be trained on mandated reporter. That is something new, I believe, last year, and very important that we get that training done. CEA offers that training. You can look on our training calendar or give us a call and we can hook you up with that training. Review your in-person and remote policies, wage and hour, leave of absence, everything we went through. You want to make sure your supervisors, your lower level supervisors, the ones that are interacting with your employees, they're the ones that matter. They need to be trained on this. And if you're not able to train them, we do have our webinar series, LEAD. The LEAD program is a 6-week series. We have the next one starting in October, specifically for supervisors out there. And it takes them through everything I talked to, but in a very slow-paced way, as well as not just compliance, because that's half of it, but also soft skills, communicating with your team, strengths finders, all these things are covered for your supervisors. And then we also have HR 101, which is not just for HR people, but also for your supervisors and managers and leads. It's a great class. That one's not as long. That one is only, I think it's a 4-week series, maybe even be 3 weeks. So please check us out. Give us a call if any of that sounds like it's interesting or something that may apply to your company. If you are at a company that's located outside of California, need a little extra help, please scan this QR code and look at our resource for out-of-state employers. And it's a great, you get a phone call with it and you have someone walking you through it. It's a great way to get a little extra support for your California employees. And if you need us to be on site, if you need a little bit help, you need more than just a phone call to us, we do offer outsourced CHR, which means we come out to you, we become part of your team, and we help you out through all your HR needs. It could be a very temporary relationship or maybe a long-term one. So we're here to offer peace of mind to employers depending on what your needs are. If you are looking into membership with us so that you can get all our templates and our trainings and you don't have to pay extra for that, that is included in your premium plans and your ultimate plans here. We also have a deal right now where associate membership is only $99 a month. So for $99 a month, you get access to all of our website. So if that's something that you need that's a little bit more, we ask you to just go to employers.org and give us a call or visit us on that website. So I thank you for joining me today. We'd love your feedback. If you can scan the QR code, I think Anna's also going to be sending out um, the survey as well. But that's it for me. If you have any questions, please give me a call. I know we ran out of time. I'll be here for another minute or so if anyone has anything. Anna, I'll hand it back to you.
All right, awesome. Lots to process.
Yeah, that was a lot.
I do want to say that I will drop the HRCI and SHRM codes into the chat.
Thank you for that, Anna, because I did forget that.
You got it. That is what I'm here for. So your codes are in the chat in case you're watching the recording and don't have access to the chat. Your HRCI code is 625722. Your SHRM code is 23-9GXQH. If for some reason you did not get that on the recording, go ahead and shoot us an email. We'll help you out. Okay, now that that's out of the way, yeah, I know Asher said she'd be on for another minute, but I do want to thank everybody for joining us today. I really hope that you found this presentation valuable. And again, we can't stress it enough. If you can help us out by clicking through to the survey, it really does only take 1 or 2 minutes, and it really helps us continue to build these resources and develop trainings that really help our employers. So to find out about future webinars and forums, please go to employers.org, and thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. And I will let Astrid close us out whenever you're ready after.
Yeah, Anna. Sounds like everyone's pretty set there. So I appreciate everyone's time today. Give us a call if you have any other questions. And Jaime, I'll get back to you on that question. Thanks so much. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.